You're listening to episode 142, Swapnil's Story, a daughter with food allergies. Hello, my friends. I'm so glad you're here today. We have a dad on the podcast, which I always love hearing from medical dads, and this specifically is one heck of an advocate and allergy parent for his daughter, who they discovered had severe food allergies. They had suspected it around 6 months, and then finally had an incident right after her 12th month birthday when she turned 1 year old, and their life changed forever. And they are constantly advocating, coming up with new ideas, searching for the right doctors, not stopping at no, and coming up with unique ways to not only empower themselves and their families, but other families too. So I'm so grateful to be able to have this dad swap on the podcast today. And I think one of the big takeaways is just how the partnership between himself and his wife have really made for them to be able to handle all of this. And I think it's pretty inspiring. So I'm so glad I got to have them on the podcast today. Let's get started with their story. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
When we first found out about this is a lot different than today. We're more comfortable with this, but the more people that, have these resources and these anecdotes to help them understand and cope and then eventually manage with things is very helpful in hindsight, because we were lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's nice to kind of hear that perspective too, right? Like, I'm going to make it through this initial shock, and like where there's going to be a next phase, and it doesn't make it easier, but it's like, I know there's something else to get to.
Right. It definitely doesn't make it easier, but that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Right, exactly. It may not be like a bright white light, but it might be like a little orange, but there's another light that you'll get to.
Exactly. For when you're ready.
Yes.
It reminds me of, there's this little book, I think it's called like The Rabbit That Listened or something, that my daughter has, and all these different personalities come in and they try to like get to the solution sooner, but the kid isn't ready to talk about it till he's ready to talk about it.
Ooh.
And the bunny is just sitting next to him, and then when they connect and everything is better, but it wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, wait,
for the 7 pages of people that came.
I'm going to need the name of this book. That sounds awesome, because I always preach that. I'm always like, kids will, when they're ready to listen, they will listen. And then when they're not ready, they won't. And they'll give you clues as to which one they are, ready or not ready.
Yeah. It's called The Rabbit Listened.
The Rabbit Listened. Okay. All right. I'm going to look that up for sure. Well, why don't you start off just telling us a little bit about you? Shout out to the dads. I love when a dad comes on the podcast, and just sharing kind of what your experience is like. But, first of all, your name, your family, where y'all live, and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. My name is Swapnil Patel. I am a dad of now a 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. My wife, Nilly, and I live with our family in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina. We have been here for about 10 years now, and before that, I'm from New York and she's from Florida.
Okay, so you're East Coasters.
Correct.
That's the way it goes. Okay, I like it. And so, Swapnil, I'm just so thankful that you're here today to chat with us a little bit about what your family's experience was like. And so why don't you just start from the beginning and kind of walk us through any kind of clues that something was going on with your daughter?
Yeah, so our daughter, her name's Anya. She, in her first 6 months or so, had a lot of eczema. We weren't really sure what was going on, but her cheeks would be red, and her elbow creases and behind the knees would have different amounts of eczema. And we really weren't sure, but my wife had a sense that something was not like appropriate or right or whatever, and so she would make sure to lather her up. But around a year, she had a bite of cashew butter, and she had just had like an anaphylactic reaction where she had a lot of hives, and she was vomiting, and we weren't sure what to do. So I was actually out on a run with my brother-in-law around the neighborhood, and they were visiting, for Anya's first birthday. And my wife was racing to the Walgreens in the front of the neighborhood in the car, and she's like, Anya's having a reaction. And so I was very close to the house, ran, and I saw her. We, in hindsight, should have called 911, and, it's probably would have been the smartest thing to do, but we had no idea what was going on. We gave her some Benadryl, and she calmed down, but it wasn't until pretty much the next day where, the hives had kind of settled down and disappeared, and she was in a better state. But that was a big shock and an awakening, because nobody in our family has life-threatening food allergies, so we weren't used to this or aware of this as a possibility. And now in hindsight, it's becoming much more common. I think that the latest status is 1 in 12 or 13 kids have life-threatening food allergies, and so more people are starting to be aware of this, from schools to parents and friends of kids, and I think it's going to eventually become a better, safer environment as more people are aware. But in that moment, we were scrambling, and luckily we got through it without, the worst case scenario in that situation.
It's like you're blindsided too. Like you're out on a run, family's visiting, Anya's birthday. It's probably the last thing that you thought would happen. And then it's like they tell you to wait till 12 months, right? And it's you finally do the waiting. And I remember when we first gave our kids peanut butter, and it's probably so shocking to even think through what that day was like.
Yeah, and then it's a 180-degree different with her little sister Amani, who's luckily, knock on wood, there's no allergies, and so the things that we think about and had to manage with Anya, everything from going to daycare and sending and packing every meal, letting all the teachers know, my wife going ahead of time to talk to the teachers, talk to the nurses at school, and let them, I drop Amani off, and then I go to work. Then my wife picks her up, and she comes home. There's like all the normal stuff.
Yeah.
Is like glaringly missing. Like
Yes.
like what we went through for 4 years. With before Amani was born, that became our new normal. Isn't required for Amani. And it's just like a relief in that sense. But it was early on a shock, as you referenced it, because we just weren't aware that this is what everyday stuff would be like in that moment. We were just trying to make sure she was okay. We were scrambling. Again, we probably did all the wrong things, but got lucky, because we should have just called 911. So many stories you read about within the allergy community, the importance of getting epinephrine in somebody at a early phase of that reaction is critical. And so we're just thankful that it worked out.
Wow. Well, tell us a little bit about, what happened next. So she, the next day got a little bit better, and I assume y'all took her in and did some testing.
Yeah, we went to a local allergist at that time to verify like what was going on. They do the skin test with the pricks on the back. They number them 1 to 25 or whatever, and they prick you with all this stuff. That alone is like a little bit of a traumatic experience for a little kid. Like you got to hold the kid down, and they're screaming. They don't know what's going on. It's certainly not comforting to be held down, and like someone, larger and unknown is poking you and all this sort of stuff. But that helped, based on the size of the welts, helped identify certain foods that she was allergic to. But that's also a tricky area where the research has maybe changed from before to after. The guidance from different people is varied, but The only way to really know is to try. And then there are signals from a blood and a skin test that help you know what to avoid. But in some cases, like there may be false positives where if she was comfortable eating something and it showed up negative, we're to try to keep that in her diet as opposed to taking it out, because that could be more harmful, right? So there were a lot of these things that we were trying to figure out what to do, which foods to eat. And in many cases, we had to do what was called an elimination diet, where you instead of providing a food that has multiple ingredients in it, you start with one ingredient at a time and you build your way back up. Like my wife has a spreadsheet that she literally logged every single thing and we were checking off every single thing that she could eat and avoiding a few of the things that we knew she couldn't. And in some cases, stuff that she was okay eating, she was okay eating green peas and beans and lentils. And after a certain period of time, she started developing hives and adding those as allergens. So it made things more complicated. And I think the hardest part about it was it wasn't very black and white. And that's what made it really difficult. And again, I give a lot of credit to my wife, but she bared the burden of a lot of the thoughtfulness. I'm very good at executing, and she's just much more regimented and following things in a methodical manner. And that was very necessary here to be able to identify what it was, look for patterns from what it was before, because she had kept that log when the eczema was happening I try to identify, was it something that we were feeding her that was causing this? Was it something before even she started solids that Nilly was consuming that was leading to more eczema, from the breast milk, or all these hypotheticals that led to more information gathering that led to eventually a clear picture of, okay, we know that she's allergic to these 20 things. And then it was about what do we do knowing that.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were kind of describing this very regimented process, that spreadsheet just must have been her lifeline and your lifeline too, because you're humans, right? And you work and you have other things that are going on and you're trying to care for a baby too. And just all of the outside factors, lack of sleep, that you get as a parent. And I'm sure that referring to that spreadsheet was really an important part of y'all's process.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was the only way to really look and identify, because you forget what you fed them yesterday. You don't know what they had, the night. And when you think about how many meals you have and how many ingredients are in all the things you eat, unless you break it down in a way that you can actually look for stuff and analyze that and try to find commonalities, it was not going to be something that we were going to get more clues from. Our regular way of going about it wouldn't have shed light on anything.
So what did you discover about her food allergies? Are there any kind of big, groups that you know to stay away from, or are you still guessing now as she's older? What has that process been like?
No, for the last several years, we've been pretty clear on what it is, and thankfully she's not had a reaction in 4 years, because we've just been more cautious about how to go about it. So she doesn't eat out. We feed her everything from home. With products that are store bought. There are some places that are really good about telling you what cross contamination or cross contact is the right phrase, or what cross contact there may be from shared lines. Like Trader Joe's, for example, Nilly can look at the SKU number, call their customer helpline, and they can tell you if something is on shared lines with all these other allergens. And that's really helpful, because for Anya, some of her reactions have been so sensitive that if she can eat quinoa. One time she ate quinoa and another time she ate the same quinoa, but for whatever reason she was having a reaction, and it turned out that they changed the manufacturing on it, and it was now done on shared lines with one of her allergens. So it was that level of diligence that Nilly's been been paying attention to help avoid the reactions that, otherwise could easily happen and probably lead to a lot of confusion because you didn't know what you changed. Like, she had the same thing and she had the same thing after, and why did it cause a reaction the second time, right? So being able to dissect things from that base understanding of what she was allergic to, the severity of her allergens, let us figure out how to manage moving forward versus just be confused.
How did you handle the stress of like navigating all of that? So you mentioned you were out for a run, around her birthday, and is exercise something you do to take care of yourself? It's a lot to manage and have to think about every morsel that goes into your child's mouth could potentially be harmful. How do you take care of yourself through all of that?
I think being able to mitigate the risk has probably been the most helpful. And so we've done a couple of things on that standpoint, and it's mainly for her and by default helping us that way.
Yeah.
So the first thing is finding a group of allergists that we felt really comfortable with. The first allergist that we went to, in hindsight, wasn't the best person for us because some of the advice that she had shared has been like, the other allergists we've talked to have shared different advice, and the more research we've done, it's probably more up to date. So we actually we found an allergist that was 2.5 hours away in Charlotte that we've been going to since to do something called Sub-lingual Immunotherapy. When you have a lot of allergens, this is an interesting and relatively low risk treatment to consider, which basically it's like these bottles with serum in them that have small trace amounts of everything you're allergic to that they have access to put in there. So Anya has 3 bottles from Dr. Schroeder's office in Charlotte that she takes 3 drops a day, holds them under her tongue for 2 minutes at a time, and then what it's doing is introducing a small amount of that allergen into her body, and it comes in and it uneventfully is there, and it gets stair-stepped up every 3 months or so to a higher amount of it, to a certain degree where they can do it up to, because this treatment is low risk because it's still just a small amount, whereas the next thing we'd graduate up to is something called OIT, and that's oral immunotherapy, where you consume larger amounts, like micrograms or whatever it ends up being, versus like 1/10,000th of a particle, right, in the SLIT stuff. So she would move on to that. But the thing with SLIT is you can have upwards of 10, 20 different allergens in a bottle or a set of bottles. With OIT, you have to do it per particular allergen. So we would do OIT for sesame and OIT for tree nut and stuff like that. So that's a longer path. So we've been doing the SLIT to try to get to a base level of protection or tolerance for as many of her allergens as possible. And the next thing we've been thinking about is what's the right time frame to do OIT, but you want to try to do it at a time where your child's not sick often. So the winter isn't a great time, because if your immune system is compromised, there's maybe a higher chance that you're going to overload the system, and it's going to lead to the opposite of what you want. So a lot of little things that we're picking up from feedback along the way. But the team of allergists, I think, was, going back to your question, was one of the best things. So we work with Dr. Schroeder in Charlotte, and then we have a local allergist in Dr. Fitzhugh in Chapel Hill. So if she's doing a blood draw, if we would do OIT locally, that would be through his office. And then we're also working with another doctor. His name is Dr. Jane, and he's got offices in Seattle and San Francisco, because Dr. Schroeder doesn't have legume SLIT, but Dr. Jane does. So we have 1 extra bottle of legumes for SLIT that comes from him and his office, and we're able to like piece this whole thing together to try to, again, mitigate the worst case scenario, which is some accidental exposure that leads to, the anaphylactic reaction that we're trying to avoid.
Right, right. Well, it sounds like, you're just kind of mentioning her, really Anya having to get involved, right? As she gets older, she has to start making some of the choices, really understand what's going on. How have you guys communicated food allergies to her, and what kind of questions has she had? And, I really am thinking about holding medication under your tongue for 2 minutes. She has to really be an involved and active participant in that. And how are you guys integrating her into this whole experience?
Yeah, I mean, she has been doing the drops since she was 2 years old. At first, when she was that young, she just did whatever we asked, and it was like very easy and a little bit of gamification for her. And now she's just much more aware of it, and she knows the importance of it. It's just it's a little bit of a chore every day to stop having fun and doing what you're doing to take the drop. But she's been a really good kid in terms of like understanding the importance of this. And I think the second thing is like Nilly's done a really good job of being mindful of the psychological impact that feeling different can be. So if you're in a school or a daycare setting and there's kids celebrating a birthday party and you can't eat the cake because it has egg in it and you're allergic to egg, or it's, food provided by other people that we don't know if it's safe because who knows how it was made and, if they've got any cross contact with their allergens and stuff like that. So Nilly is always in touch with the parents or teachers to get a pulse on when something's happening, so she can make a comparable snack, dessert, whatever it is, so that Anya never feels left out. So in managing that portion of it, she's been able to just focus on, trying to do her part to help herself for that. And then the book that I wrote and self-published, that was really helpful for her because the thought of something like an epi-pen can be scary, but understanding what it's like and the importance of doing that and practicing, with the test version with her and making epi feel more accessible and positive, and, the role that epi should play in her life moving forward is, I think, a good thing and something that she latched onto given how young she was. And you're reading books to her, like reading is part of like a daily thing where you're helping expose the kid to different stories. So that angle was helpful as well, given her age.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. First of all, you and your wife just sound like really a great team, just working together. She can handle that part, you're handling this one, and then you're just you're there for each other when you have to do it. And I know that's not always easy, especially bringing another kid into the world and just all of that comes with. So you guys are pretty inspiring in terms of that partnership that you've done for Anya. We'll be right back. If you have ever wondered where you could get those cloth dolls that Child Life Specialists use with kids for medical education or sending home to siblings or to draw on for therapeutic activities, then you don't have to wonder any longer, because our friends at Smile Makers have decided to now sell these amazing cloth dolls for a very affordable price. I know that when I was in the hospital, I would have to rely on a volunteer network to then give us the dolls, which was really nice, but I had to wait a lot of times. Like, I would need a doll now and I wasn't able to get it. So this is a great place to be able to go get your procedure dolls at smilemakers.com. And y'all, they have 3 different skin tones for these cloth procedure dolls. In addition, you can actually buy a procedure doll prep bundle that comes with fabric markers. This is a fabulous way to do your medical teaching, to help siblings feel involved, to get kids creative, to do a lot of teaching about different diagnoses. And so go to smilemakers.com so you can get your cloth dolls as soon as possible before they run out. And when you go to that checkout to get your cloth dolls, also type in OnCall20 and you will get 20% off your entire order. So not just the cloth dolls. So if you get a bundle for Child Life Specialists, if you get a piece of furniture, if you get one of their really cool toys and prizes, or you order a large sticker order from them, On-Call 20 gets you 20% off your whole order. That's smilemakers.com, code OnCall 20 to get 20% off. And then, yeah, I'm so excited to talk about your book. And you kind of just gave us a glimpse about it. But how, what inspired you to take that step? Had you ever published a book before? Reading to her at night, really just seeing the impact that stories had. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So I work in an ad agency, and so we're constantly like making stuff to try to help people understand something, whether in some cases you're selling like a new shoe or new pizza or
Sure.
whatever it is. So that part of my brain is just, always on. And I'm very solution oriented. A lot of times I need to be better at just listening. And that's the part I struggle with that my wife is extraordinarily good at. So if I have like with this, my natural reaction was, how do we solve it? How do we solve it? And so much of it was really about processing and doing the diligence to understand. And I think the second resource, in addition to our allergists that I forgot to mention, was really the allergy community. We actually found out about the allergists and these types of treatments through another parent that my cousin was friends with, and she had connected us to, and she's actually out west, but she had gone through all this for her son, and she helped provide a lot more perspective and all of the base level knowledge we needed to get going. And that was the first solution or the first step to providing some semblance of like, what does this new way of life look like for us? And then in my brain, again, always looking for solutions and things from a different perspective, just took the context of, hey, here's a scary thing, but that scary thing is life-saving or potentially life-saving and necessary in so many instances. And how do you take that and make that okay for a kid? And one of the common things you would think of was like, storytelling, and to be able to turn something into with words and pictures into less of a scary thing and more help it lead to the moral or the takeaway you want. So a lot of the inspiration came from our daily habits of reading stories, but then also I would forget as we walk out of the house to go for a walk around the neighborhood. We sometimes every day we'd say, hey, do we have the epi-pen? Do we have the epi-pen? And sometimes it was my job and I'd forget, and we were 2 steps out the garage, and Nilly's like, we forgot the epi-pen, and so we have to go back. And so one of the thoughts is how do we create this book or this character? And then what I do at work is I run the media planning and buying group, and basically what we do is find the right touch points to put messaging so that you can lead to a takeaway. So a door hanger at the entrance of a house or at the exit of a house is like where you're going in and out. And if that's where you're supposed to remember to take this thing that's supposed to be a life-saving device or medication, that's the perfect touch point to remind yourself.
That.
So the book has the book has a simple message, which is to remember to take epi everywhere you go. And so like the storyline is very based on our daily habits, all prior to COVID, but it was like, the title of the book is Epi, You're My Best Friend. And the line starts with, Epi, you come with me everywhere, to the park, to the grocery store, birthday parties, all these scenarios. And then it ends with like, even to the allergist for food challenges, you're a lifesaver. It's that kind of like simplicity is meant for younger kids to lean into. And we've heard that from some of the parents that have purchased the book, is like it's been something that their child has gravitated to, versus previously it may have felt like the topic of epi may have felt like an intimidating thing that they didn't know how to bring up with their kid, or the kid is going to naturally be scared of, right? And so being able to help from that perspective, from our own experience, is what we wanted to be able to share within the community with others.
And when you get that feedback from other parents, it's just like it feels so good, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I think like I find value um, in those anecdotes we hear. In some cases, like the first couple of things were local, and then like we've shipped books. I've used it as like an entertaining thing with Anya, where we go to the post office and drop off some of the things, and I teach her the states that they're going to, and people in these states like she's starting to be familiar with, but it's like, oh, it's going to Texas, it's going to Florida, and it's going to Missouri and Montana, and it's like scary in the sense that this need for allergy this proliferation of allergies is
Right.
worldwide. We shipped a book to Australia to a mom that was willing to pay more shipping, and I found a way to make it work to get it out there. But she literally wanted to help her daughter get exposed to this at a young age, and somehow the book ended up in Australia for that.
Well, you're making quite a difference, and I think it's like that key, those daily practices that you're doing to teach her. It seems like you never even really had to have a conversation with Anya about what was happening, because it's just always been a part of the conversation, which I think is just a great way to tackle anything in life.
Yeah, and I'll be perfectly candid, is when we have to stick her with an epi-pen, she's going to freak out. Like, she's, as much as the conversation we've had, it's not going to solve for that. But more importantly, she understands that it's there to do the right thing for her. And the way we can even do better than that is just to be mindful of who's eating what around you. And like, it's opened up the doors to have conversations that can hopefully get well ahead of the need to ever use the epi, but that it should be with us everywhere we go.
Well, I have one more question for you. It's my favorite question. If you can describe to us what Anya has taught you kind of through this experience of becoming her dad and having a child with food allergies, what would that be?
She is a really special kid. She's just so loving. She's so empathetic. It's really, really impressive to see that. I don't remember much of my younger years, and moved around a lot and whatnot, and the exact opposite of my wife. She remembers like moments, and Anya's very much like that. And so she's just a good reminder of why we do everything we do, and kind of the reciprocation of love you get from that. None of it's it's also pure, that you're like, man, this is what it's like being a kid that just is in a good situation, but dealing with other stuff. Is how do you help her, and how do you do as much as you can for her?
Oh, I love that. Well, she sounds just incredible. And if people want to order your book or follow along with you, do you post on social media, and where can people do that?
Yeah, so our Instagram handle or Facebook handle is at Swapnil's Cafe. So my name is Swap, and Nilly, and she enjoys cooking, and so much of that has gone to how she is able to help make meals and think of stuff for Anya. So that's the cafe part. It's not literally a cafe; it's just the common names and the passion. And then the book is called Epi, You're My Best Friend, and it's on Amazon. So we've probably sent out 400 copies to people all around the country, which has been awesome. Really cool.
Well, I will definitely link to both of those, and I'm just so grateful for you speaking out on this to help educate other families, but to help families feel less alone too as they kind of try to navigate the beginning stages of all this. I'm very grateful for you.
Well, thank you as well. And if anybody is in that state where they're new to this scenario, we're happy to be a resource, so people can feel free to reach out, because we remember each of the instances where people were there for us, and that just made such a big difference.
Well, thank you so much. It was so nice to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.